The main subject of this webinar is the multi-user access to this database. So we're going to now look at how we can start to administer this database and how we can set up the security. So the first thing to look at is if you double-click on this schema node, or alternatively you can right-click and say Edit Schema, it opens what we call the Schema Editor. Now this is the administrative interface to your database. You get a slightly more fine-grained, more sort of database level view of the information in the database, and you can perform administrative tasks that you can't perform just using the normal IJC user interface, the form view, the grid view, and things like that. This is the more advanced interface to the database where you can perform administrative tasks. You'll see that we basically go from right to left here in sort of ascending order of sort of abstraction. Here we're seeing the database tables that are present in the database. The ones that are in black here are ones that are already known to InstantJChem and are being used. These ones in grey are tables that are in the database that are not yet being used by InstantJChem. In the Views tab, you'd see any database views that were existing in InstantJChem, in the database. And starting with InstantJChem 3, we can now start using views as well as tables. But the tables and the views, to be used in InstantJChem, they need to be basically represented by what we term an entity. That is basically InstantJChem's representation of a database table. It provides a slightly more sort of user-friendly approach to the database than looking at the raw database tables, and you can see the views, you saw the fields and the things like that. So the one thing I particularly want to point out here is that we've got tables in the database that InstantJChem doesn't know about. Now, if you'd connected to a database for the very first time, you might have lots of these tables, and InstantJChem might not know about any of them. So what we can do is we can make them known to InstantJChem, and we do that by a process called promotion. So what we can do is we can promote a table. Remember, we had this table, this JChem table that was in the database that isn't yet known to InstantJChem. So we're going to promote it, and we get a wizard that lets you then basically pull this table into InstantJChem and let it be used. So on the first step, you can specify a few parameters about the table itself, and the second step, you've got the option now of how you want the columns in the database to be handled. And some of them are visible by default, and some of them are hidden by default. You can change this if you want. You can make some of the hidden ones visible, or you can make some of the visible ones hidden. But typically, you don't need to do. Typically, the defaults are okay. And now we've basically brought this table into InstantJChem, and it's now available for use as any other table, as if it had been created inside InstantJChem. It's now been added to the project. The data tree for it has been created. It's present in the project. We've created a default grid view for it, and we're now seeing the contents of that database table in the grid view. So that's just for one table, but you might have the situation that you had lots of tables in there, and you'd need to promote them all and make them accessible. You can make use of the foreign key constraints that are in the database and make them accessible to InstantJChem as relationships, and so you can start building relational data structures and things like that. So that's as far as I'm going to go with the Schema Editor for today. The main thing I just wanted to point out is the ability to connect to an existing database and be able to pull tables into InstantJChem that already existed in the database.